People think that sex education is about the act of
Yeah,
sex. Sex
exactly.
education in its truest natural form is about us being aware and showing up for ourselves in a way that everything that has to do and related to sex isn't about sex. We don't really want sex. We want sex right before our cycle because that's when our body is ready to reproduce. Do I feel like I should be sexy? I should feel good in my skin. Having that awareness that yes, if you're a couple, you probably need, and I would not even say probably need, is required that you have a combination of both. You have to have the true intimacy to have really good, healthy, happy relationships.
Oh,
Vulnerable the act of sex is when we think about how you truly are, for the most part, unclothed,
mm,
completely naked, and allowing someone everything that we do from the minute that we come into this world to the minute that we leave could have some intersection with our sexuality, and that is okay and natural. We lose what we are and who we are.
all right. Thank you so much, Davondra, for having this conversation with me and taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know how busy you are, how wonderfully you are serving the world. But I appreciate you taking the time to share your message, your wisdom, and this crucial piece of information that most of us miss on that. We don't include this topic in our conversation, and there is so much good that we can do, so much service that we can do if we include this topic in our day-to-day conversation, especially for our younger generation, for our kids to be knowledgeable about this topic, so they hear this information from someone who cares about them, who have the right information, so they don't have to rely on misinformation or other people cannot take their advantage, okay, cannot take advantage of them. So I'm super thrilled that we are having this conversation. But following the tradition of my podcast, I would love to start with this signature question where I ask my guest what is their definition of word bloom. So same for you. What is your definition of the word bloom?
Sure, thanks, Ansa. I love your title and the word bloom. I think for me really just means to show your best self and to present how you feel you should show up in the world and take up space and light up whatever I think area that you're in. It doesn't matter what expertise you have. I don't think it matters the level of education you have. I think the reality is that we can show up and shed light and spread joy in this world wherever we are. And I think there's an opposite part of that word bloom that I love too, and that's that you can rest as well, right? Because bloom means that you're actually opening up and showing. Well, that means if you have to open up, that at some point you were closed, and making sure that you were taking care of self and making sure that you were doing all the things necessary for you to show up in the world as your best self. And so I feel like I didn't want to miss that part of the word bloom. I think a lot of people sometimes think of just the action, but the inaction in and of itself is an action. And so that's for me what the word bloom means and how I kind of interpret it.
Wow, showering us with your wisdom right out of the gate. I love that.
Well, I just think sometimes we don't think about the rest. We don't think about what it takes for us to be great in whatever it is that we do. And it does take that time. I think that's the reason why we start thinking that being having self-care is being selfish, and it's not, right? It really is about you preparing what you need to prepare, kind of like a cocoon, right? You're preparing everything in the inside so that when you come out as the beautiful butterfly, when you bloom as the beautiful tulip, like you're ready to show the world this is what I've been working on. This is what has been happening in the background. So I think it's
Awesome.
important.
Love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. So now, if you could tell our audience what they will get and learn from this conversation today and how this will change their life and the life of their loved ones.
Yeah, so I have been a sexual wellness educator for over 25 years. And I think the way that I like to engage with other people is really to facilitate education around sexual wellness, more as a topic of their embodiment, understanding who they are, and they show up in the world as a sexual being, regardless of whether or not if they're from, on anywhere on the spectrum of sexuality. When I talk about this is not about a sexual orientation. This is not about a gender identity. This is not about who you engage in sex activities with. This literally is about you being a sexual being, a person. And what I'd like to make sure people, I think, get out of any engagement I have, any facilitation of education around this topic is that it's completely natural. We're born into this world as a sexual being, whether or not we act on that, whether or not we decide to really bring that and bloom it in the world. That's our choice, but it is who we are at the very beginning and all the way to the very end. And so I like to make sure that I talk about it and I encourage other people to talk about sexuality. It's very natural as a way of a part of our life and a part of our health and wellness, and especially a part that we tend to neglect, right? And just trying to start to having people understand how we can do that in a healthy way, how they can infuse their own ethics and morals in it, but that the conversation really needs to be around the naturalness of sex and sexuality and not about what I think some of our societies have turned it into is kind of, perversion or prevention, right? It's all about disease prevention versus how do I truly live sexually well? Where is that intersection of me and my sexuality that is just who I am and not something I'm trying to purport because society told me to do it.
Yes. So I would
Yeah.
love for you to, expand on that last part of the question that you asked, who I am and, intersection of me and my sexuality.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like anything else, right? So I think that there's this big, um, I think now we have a big push around mental health and mental wellness, right? And so we tap
Right.
into who we are, what does that mean? How do we peel apart the layers of society and what they've put on us to be who we are? But truly kind of come out as this when I stop and I think about things and I take in what the messages are, how do they resonate with me? What do I want to stay? What do I want to leave?
Mm,
I think we have to be that kind of intentional around our sexuality. Too often I hear, well, women don't really like sex, men like sex. Or, well, that little girl was being fast because of what she was wearing. And so she made herself accessible to rape or molestation. Or this is just how boys are. They act like that and they do things that are inappropriate, but it's appropriate for boys, so it's okay. Those are all messages. Those are all labels that we take on because society has told us that is the way to interact with ourselves and our sexuality. When we stop and we take into consideration whether or not that's really what we want to put out in the world as who we are and how we are, then we stop and we say, this is who I am as a sexual being. This is what I want to teach my children about themselves as a sexual being, right? So, case in point with the analogy I used for being fast, right? So we use fast as I don't know, I'm a Gen Xer, Ansa, so like we use fast in our culture, meaning like that little girl might be promiscuous, but because what she's wearing,
mm,
she's up for it. She's up for having these kind of ogles and being chased at by not only boys but men, and she's welcoming. It's almost this kind of supportive rape culture, right?
mm,
And but the reality is that if we look at it, we're at that age at like 15, 16, 17, you're coming into your own. Your body is developing. If you happen to live in a hot climate and you're wearing short shorts, that doesn't mean I want somebody to attack me.
yes.
But why is it the perception of society that allows us to believe, well, that's the reason why I can't wear short shorts? You can not wear short shorts. Maybe it's against your religious values. Maybe it's against your family's moral values. Maybe it's just a modesty thing for you.
Yes.
That's fine. But it's also fine that that's your decision, not because somebody else is telling you that's what you need to do in order to discourage bad behavior on someone else's part,
Mm,
right?
Right.
And so when we start making those types of decisions for ourselves, it's only because we start getting educated about what sexuality, and true sexual wellness means.
Absolutely. So this is where, it sparks so many questions for me, especially. How do we begin to understand and educate ourselves as young boys, young girls? What does the sexuality mean for us, and where do we learn that, right? Who do we go to if we have some questions and we are growing up and we are seeing some changes in our, physical body, in our emotions, and we are feeling differently. We are, for example, when I was very young, I had this actor that I used to, he was a singer and actor, and I had a crush on him, and I didn't understand why. I just liked him, he was not accessible in any way. And still, I would get those feelings for him. And I'm like, wow, where is this coming from? And in my culture, we are very modest in terms of how you dress up, how you even think thoughts. You have to be very particular. And I had no one to go and discuss or even ask this question. And it still, bothers me in a way, that why I did not have, even my mother was around, right? We lived in a society that's mostly very close knit. But what should a young child do around those times, and who should they go to with those questions?
Yeah, great question. Great question, Ansa. And I think that, I'm was born and raised here in America. I think also though I was in the deep south, and so our culture was pretty much the same. You heard these things happening around you, you saw things and stuff on television, but to be able to process it as a teenager, to have someone to talk to as a sounding board, to have someone to give me accurate, age appropriate education, it didn't necessarily exist.
Mm,
So for me, my mom always taught me, if you want to know something, look it up, read. And so I would plop myself in our library and read all of these books around my body, like my body, myself, and or our body, ourselves, and um, questions with Bob Berkowitz, like, the pioneers of what we know as kind of sex education in America. Uh, uh, Dr. Ruth Westheimer, Bob Berkowitz, those folks that were really having conversations and understanding what it meant to know your body, to be exploratory with your body. That's where I started. That's where I learned. But you're right. We should have those people around us that we're able to trust
right.
with our questions to get the answers. I like to tell parents all the time, this is your opportunity to infuse your morals and values. Just do it from an age appropriate, truly accurate information manner, right? Because when you don't talk about it,
Hmm.
kids are going to go find it somewhere else.
Exactly.
The information is coming to them. They're asking about it because they heard it somewhere.
Right.
They're asking about it because they're having feelings. And the
Yes.
feelings that you explained, just to kind of go back to that, those are hormonal, right?
Mm,
That's very age appropriate. Our body starts changing because we're going into puberty or prepubescent. That's our body getting ready for whatever possibility to reproduce at some point.
mm.
Well, if you believe in higher powers, if you believe in Christianity, for me, I'm a Christian, it's to say, God said, okay, I have to give you some reason to want to reproduce.
Yes.
And that's what arousal is. That's what the excitement is, right? And that's
Right.
what our hormones do for us. That's basic physiology. If we don't know that, though, we tend to, or could tend to, lean into it and think, okay, well, since I'm excited and I'm aroused, now I have to engage in something.
Mm,
But that's the reality of knowing, having true body autonomy, right? If you teach
right.
body autonomy, if you teach understanding the physiological changes in a person, then I can start making the decisions for myself to say, no, I feel them, I hear them, I understand them, this is what's happening. And I'm not ready to engage in sexual activity because all of these other reasons. There's emotional things that I have to take into consideration. There's bad consequences that I have to take into consideration. There's things that I don't necessarily know yet that I think I want to know before I go into that activity. all of those things come into play, and you feel like you do have somewhere you can bounce that off if parents and adults that you trust in a child's life are there for them to have those conversations.
Wow. And that reminds me of so many incidents that I heard, especially in my culture. As I said, I come from Pakistan. In Pakistan, so many girls are being killed in the name of, honor killing because as you said, those girls are not educated, and when the time comes, they feel certain kind of emotions and changes in their emotional health and in their physiology, and they just think, okay, it's time for me to fall in love with a man or with a boy of my age, and they run away from homes thinking like this is the right thing to tackle these emotions and take care of what I'm feeling right now, and they
Mm,
end up being killed. Another example, and there is this superb Indian Punjabi movie. The title of the movie is Jaggi, and when we had this discovery call, right, we were talking
mhm.
about it. In that movie, there is this adolescent boy who is in school. He doesn't know what is happening to his body, the way it is changing, the way he's feeling. And he asks a question from a class fellow who is equally ignorant about all of that, education. In schools in Pakistan, or I believe in India too, they don't have those kind of information available to those boys, or a mentor or a coach or a teacher who can help them with understanding the changes happening in their body. And that movie, I have only watched the trailer of that movie, and it made me think what kind of disaster uh, can wait or happen to your kids if they don't have the right kind of help, as you said, the right kind of uh, information from the right person. So
Agreed.
this is disastrous. So I would encourage everyone, to please educate yourself and educate your kids and be a resource for your kid, because every single kid is going to go through those hormonal changes from that phase of life. And if they don't find the information from the right person, they will go and get it from the wrong one. And that's where all the abuse and perpetual cycle of abuse even starts in their life.
Yeah, I would like to like agree with that and then add on like we also have to just watch some of the basic, what I think we become basic and culturally unaware of the things that we're saying sometimes. Um, things like, you always do what an adult tells you to do.
Mm,
That sounds very mundane and like really good advice for a child. But then what happens with that non-trusted adult? What happens with the person that is a molester or has been like what happens then? You told me, you've put it in my head constantly to only listen, to only do what I'm told. Where's the caveat? Where's the trusted individuals, people that your parents know, nothing that is making you feel uncomfortable,
mm,
right? We have to add those layers. I am extremely, extremely mindful. Both of my children are athletes. One of my daughter is a competitive gymnast. We know what happened in the gymnastics world
right.
for years to some of our wonderful Olympian athletes. We know what was happening now after years of trouble and rape and incidents that was happening behind the scenes, and they did not feel like they had the opportunity or the people around them to say, I am getting fondled. They didn't have the words, they didn't have the people to tell, they didn't have the safe space. We've got to be very mindful, I think, especially as parents, on
Mm,
how we give direction to our children. What is it saying to them when it doesn't have the best of intention? Because we're telling them with the best of intention. Be
yes.
respectful to your elders, don't sass back. We really are just saying, do your part as learning from older people. The
Mm,
problem is that there is bad characters out in the world. And we also have to teach our children how to be ready for that. And so not only is it sitting them down and giving them these kind of educational pieces about your body parts and things like that, but it's also being mindful of kind of the everyday things that we say that really builds an environment for them
Mm.
to be susceptible to, to sexual assault. And we got to be mindful of that from very young, very, very young.
Yeah, exactly. And that reminds me, how I grew up, and when the elders were busy and engaged in having a conversation about real life events or incidents or all kind of gossip, we as kids were told, oh, you go away, you don't need to listen to this. This is our all, adults talk. Uh,
Hmm.
what
Hmm.
I feel, and I feel it very strongly, I'm not sure how many people can relate, with me or agree with me, but I think that is something we should not do to our kids. We should let them listen to our conversations, because to me that was the most important conversation. I would listen fully attentively to that conversation and then make my own ideas about the world around me, right? Okay,
Hmm.
they're
Hmm.
talking about this incident or this story, this happened. If this happens to me, how would I respond? But if you cut me off from the real talk, the real world talk, how I'm gonna learn? I'm gonna go out there, make mistakes, and learn the hard way. So don't push me to learn the hard way, because that's exactly how I learned so many things in my life, because I wasn't told or taught the social skills the way I could learn easily just by listening to those three or four women and
Hmm.
aunties sitting in our living room and talking about all kind of things. So what do you think about this point? Because we can sit our kids down and give them a pep talk about things. I don't think, if they are like me, I wouldn't understand much of it. But if I hear in terms of someone like talking about it, telling stories to each other through gossip, I would pick those very, very quickly and apply it on real life events.
Yes, yes, that is wonderful. I think wonderful advice, right? Keep children around. I think there's still a thing about age appropriateness, right? So if you know
Mm.
you're going to get into a very adult, maybe even graphic conversation, especially around sex and sexuality, then yes, you might want them to leave.
Yes.
But I think when we're talking like higher just relationships, oh, this person cheated on X, Y, and Z, and so they're not together anymore. Well, then that gives them the time and say, oh, well, is that going to happen to you if their parents are together? Is that going to happen to us? Like they have questions that
Mm.
are sometimes so simple, and it's the most genuine like answer that they're looking for, that we do this thing that I call, and I think it's being coined in sexological world, is adultifying, right?
Mm.
We tend to adultify the conversation of a child. If a child comes to ask you about, um, let's say they saw two people kissing, and the first thing, two people of the same sex kissing, and the
Mm.
first thing you jump to is heterosexuality, homosexuality. But all they're asking is like, oh, can I do that? Like, can I kiss my little girlfriend or little boyfriend on the cheek? Like, I saw this happen. Is that okay? You have to ask for context from these kids before you lean into answering from our adultified way. And I would do the same thing as in thinking. You got to think what they're actually saying, what they're actually hearing
Mm.
versus what you're saying, because that's how we lose the nuance of who we are, how we are culturally, how we want to show up in the world. We lose that without them being a part of it. One of the things that I realized in this day of age of everything, everybody's on their phones, right? So both of my
Yes.
children have their own phones. We have our phones. And so all of the information at this point now is based on this algorithm, and it
Mm.
feeds you what you look at. It feeds
Yes.
you what it hears you say that you want to hear.
Yep.
Well, what happens when we're no longer sitting down and looking at television together? We're
Mm.
not seeing those instances where something happens and me as the parent, I disagree with how it was handled, or I disagree with what the child said or did. We lose that dialogue with each other to have that conversation of, no, I wouldn't have done it like that if I was that person's parent. My child, my oldest kid that's here, he's 17. He is always, well, mommy, what's the problem with that? I don't see it. I don't see what the issue is. But then we're able to have the dialogue of
Yeah.
what I see the issue is and versus what he doesn't see the issue is. If
Mm.
we're not doing that, we lose that dialogue. If he's not around when we're having conversations, if my 9-year-old isn't around when we're having certain conversations, she doesn't have the opportunity to then say, well, what did you mean by?
Mm,
And why were you upset with so and so when they did this?
exactly.
Those questions build meaning for children. Those questions build the foundation of who they are going to show up in the world, who they bloom as. Because the reality is as parents, we want children to be a not only a better version, but a version of us that still resonates with the foundation we gave them.
Absolutely.
But we're not giving them foundation anymore if we keep shooing them away
Mm,
or telling them go get the information or allowing them to only get the information from what they get online, social media, the shows that they watch. I want to watch the shows that you watch. I want you to watch the shows that I watch so we can talk about them. Let's discuss. Let's figure out what I like about it, what you like about it, what we don't like about it, what I would rather you change if I see you show up in the world.
exactly. And that's where the disconnect happens, and this disconnect gets bigger and bigger. And before we know it, our kids, in so many ways, they are so distant from us and they do not learn the values that, we learn. And we definitely, as adults, we know the world better. We understand, all the dynamics of the life much, much better, and we are taking away that opportunity from them, to learn from us and then the world around us, and then make their own
Yep,
opinion and become the authentic version of themselves, how they want to live their life, what kind of a partner they want to choose when the time comes, right?
that's
what
right.
what are their values around picking up the right partner? If they were never part of the conversation from the beginning, they have no foundation. So the first person, that comes and talks to them nicely, or, treats them a little bit better, they would be like, oh, I'm falling in love with this person because, I don't know anything else. He seems nice, he looks nice, or she looks nice, and there you go.
Yep, that's exactly it. And I think that the other side of it is we, as adults, even though we do have I think obviously a more wisdom approach to life, and we carry a lot of that intellect with us. I think it's important for us to be open enough to learn from them as well.
Yes.
One of the things I remember I took for granted with my son is that I'm like, oh, you look at social media, it's feeding you everything you want to hear and see. And he says, yeah, mommy, that's true. But if I click on it and then I click on the comments, I can see all of these other perceptions and all of these other versions of how people take that in. And then I can read through that to determine what aligns with me and what doesn't. And he said, honestly, I learned that from you because you're like, always think about the other perspectives. He's like, and so that's how I use it. I would not have known that he used social media that way, right? If we didn't have that conversation, if I wasn't open and being willing to hear and learn from him, like, oh, okay, all right, that's what you're doing. And now you're seeing, he's like, yeah, you see all the variety of how people think about the exact same thing. And then you realize, oh, well, I can have my own thought about it as well. And this is what I align with. This is what I don't. This makes sense to me. This doesn't. This is something I want to ask about. It was like, and I'll come back to you and dad and ask y'all if I have questions. I'm like, all right, great. Great. You're doing exactly what I want you to do in a new way. You're applying the knowledge that I gave you in a way that's meaningful to you. And that's awesome to see.
Absolutely. Like incorporating the wisdom they are receiving from you, and, blending it together with the technology that they are so good at, and they're so good at accessing information, and the right kind of information can come to them if they have their values and their basics in place,
That's it.
right? Your foundation is strong, because you go back and forth and have that conversation with them, learn from them, and try to teach them something that you truly believe in, which are your
That's
values.
it.
Yeah, right.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. That's us saying, this is what's important to us in our family.
Yes.
Now go and be great and elevate it. Like do something even better with it. And I think one thing that came up to me, even with the kids conversation too, is don't make it um, gender specific. Like children need to know about each other. Like they
Oh,
need
yes.
to know about the other gender and now genders, right? They need to know that what that means, what that looks like. You can once again, I'm always a big proponent. fold in your own values, fold in your own morals. But to act as if other people don't exist, or to act as if your child doesn't need to know that there's other genders or doesn't need to know about them, I think that that's doing them a disservice, right? So we talk about the different body parts. We talk about the different physiological changes. My son knew what a cycle was throughout his childhood. He knew what it meant when he started getting to pre-puberty. This is what happens in boys. This is what happens in girls. This is what you might see, to the point that I folded in and I told them, if you ever, ever, ever happen to be around a young lady that gets her cycle and doesn't recognize it, doesn't notice it, and you see a blood stain on her pants, you have a jacket, take it off, put it around her waist, pull her to the side away from other people, and talk to her and say, hey, go check, go in the bathroom, take you some time, do whatever you need to do with the jacket, bring it back. So, I taught him that. I raised him like that. That's how me and my husband talked to him to inform him about things. I just asked recently, I was like, so had you ever had to do that? He's like, oh my, yeah, like 3 or 4 times. He's like, and everybody's always so like shocked about it. And but the girls are always, thank you so much. I appreciate you for doing that. Like that's what I want to see in the world. That touches my heart. I need people think that sex education is about the act of
Yeah,
sex. Sex
exactly.
education in its truest natural form is about us being aware and showing up for ourselves in a way that everything that has to do and related to sex isn't about sex.
Yes.
That's what true good sex education is about. This was about menstruation. This was about being showing up for another person in a vulnerable situation.
Yes.
This was about allowing that person to have as much body autonomy and respect of their body and their body's processes in a space that is busy and could be very traumatic if it went the other way.
Yeah.
All of that is sex education. All of that is really understanding that we've got to have a really solid foundation and be open and honest about what it is and all the changes our bodies are going through throughout the years, so we can show up in a healthy way. That is what this is about. This is the natural part of this. This is about health and wellness and not about sex. Like
Mhm.
that's one thing in the sexuality wheel, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I love how you put it together, that that act itself is a very small piece of this whole big the world of sex and intimacy and understanding your partner. And really what I truly, truly loved when you mentioned understanding the sexuality of the other gender. Because guess what? As men, as a woman, we come together, these two genders, and that's how we become whole, right? That's how we procreate. And
Right.
it's such a understated fact that not only learn about your own sexuality, your body, your physiology, all the changes that are happening within your body, but also you have to learn about the opposite gender. Because when you two come together, create a family institution, and you know nothing about your spouse, like what is going on with his or her body, emotional changes, that come, for example, for women, we say, and we experience that, throughout the month we have 4 different phases. We are feeling all kind of hormones. Every week we are a different person. And if our spouses, our counterparts in this, they don't understand us, it is a chaos for them, it's trauma. They would call us crazy, right? And they do call women crazy based on the misinformation or the lack of information. They are not educated enough to know that, okay, she has a woman's body, and that body operates completely differently from a man's body. And similar for the women. Some women would complain, okay, my husband is always after sex every single night, and what is wrong with him? She thinks something is wrong with him, right? And it, it's the main thing is, you both are not educated about each other's sexuality or physiology or what goes underneath of that. I would love for you to shed some light on that topic.
Yes, yes. I think that is spot on is that we do get into relationships and not realizing, not having a basis of what the other person goes through biologically and physiologically, and then come together and try to do this thing called life. And you have two imperfect people, and it's just funny that you're like, you have to know the other person. But the reality is you also have to know yourself, right? I'm always a big proponent of starting with self
Mm,
and what's going on with me that I'm not seeing. One thing is that, oh, yeah, because we have so many body changes as women, we don't really want sex. We want sex right before our cycle because that's when our body is ready to reproduce. That's where we get easily aroused. And that's the only thing it's for. Well, have we talked about, did we grow up in a traumatic situation? Have we talked about, did we have any past physical, emotional, or psychological trauma that we're trying to get through? Have we talked about what our upbringing and understanding of body positivity? Sorry about that. What is that? Do I feel like I should be sexy? I should feel good in my skin. Am I happy with that? Those types of things all play into what I think you're kind of explaining as libido or
mhm.
sexual energy.
Right.
All of that plays into it. So I got to know about self too, right? Before,
Yeah.
whether that's male, female, or otherwise, you got to know about self. Then, of course, you do need to know about the person that you're laying down with, the opposite sex, right? Is to say, what what is it that you're doing? What is it that you actually need? I think another thing that we do often is we conflate or we use the same terms for multiple things, right?
Mm,
So I think a lot of times for us trying to be modest or just being appropriate in public, we use intimacy
yes.
as sex. But intimacy is intimacy. I can have intimacy with someone who I'm in a completely platonic relationship with,
Yes.
and we're having an intimate conversation. Why? It's private, it's vulnerable, it's trusting, it's open, it's honest. That's intimacy, right? I think of breaking down the word intimacy into me, you see.
Into me. Use.
Into me, you see,
Wow.
right? And I can allow anyone to see into me,
Yes.
right? I can be intimate with whoever I choose to have next to me. That doesn't mean I'm being sexually intimate with that person, right? And I also think that that is, if we really want to kind of tie all these things together, that's what happens with infidelity,
Mm,
right? It's because we start having these conversations that are intimate. We have someone that's connecting to us and seeing into me.
yes.
And so, oh, they must love me. They love me in a way that my spouse isn't providing for me. So now I need to go over there. Well, what if it really was just a basic, intimate conversation? Have you had any of those? Do we have true friends that we've created to have intimate conversations with? Right? And so, having that understanding of what is intimacy versus what is sexual intimacy is extremely important. Having that awareness that, yes, if you're a couple, you probably need, and I would not even say probably need, is required that you have a combination of both. You
Yes.
have to have the true intimacy to have really good, healthy, happy relationship, right? Because then, even if you have two imperfect people that have not gotten that foundation around what their bodies look like, what their bodies act like, what their bodies should do, you now have built the intimacy. Now you've built your own foundation of intimacy to now explore and have those conversations to say, listen, hun, honestly, I know I'm a man and they tell me I should want sex all the time. But to be honest, right now, I don't want it. It's making me feel a little weird because I don't want it. I don't know why, but I really just want to sit next to you.
Yes.
Now, now we've opened the door for it to say, well, why do you think that you have to want me every day? Is
Mm,
it only because society tells you that's how men should act? Have you talked to your doctor about it if you think it's a medical issue? Have you talked to your psychologist about it or your therapist about it if you think that it's an emotional one? Do you want to have sexual arousal and can't? Because that's a different story than you are okay, it's fine, you don't want sex and it's fine, and you just want to express that to me.
Yeah, or
right?
maybe just you and I, the husband and wife together, they can have this conversation. Let's say if they don't
That's
have
right.
opportunity or resources to go to a therapist or a
That's
psychologist,
right.
right?
They've now had, that's right. They've now created that foundation to ask the questions
Yes.
of each other to have true intimacy,
Yes.
which is not necessarily sex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Wow. Thank you so much for explaining the distinction, between these two because you're right. So many people, and sometimes I overlook that word in the conversation. Okay, we are having, I mean, now I'm much more aware, but previously, okay, intimate means like, two opposite genders coming together in a sexual, romantic way, right?
Yes.
That's like it maybe not sexual, but definitely romantic. That
Yes.
the understanding of most people, like if you're being intimate with someone, you are romantically involved with that person or you're
Mm.
having romantic thoughts about that person. But no, thank you for explaining that these are two different things. And from what I'm understanding is that you have to have that intellectual intimacy with your partner, right? If you
Yes.
don't have it, try to build it because that completes you. That makes your sex life and your intimate life with your partner much more deep and much
Mm.
more pleasurable if you have this all kind of intimate conversation. You are able to have that conversation with your partner. It and in my understanding, that just makes you feel home and makes you whole.
Agreed. 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 Because what you're looking for is somewhere to be your authentic self,
Yes.
right? And home should be that for you. If you're with someone, married with someone, married to someone, that should be that person. That should be home for you. You when we really think about how vulnerable the act of sex is, when we think about how you truly are, for the most part, unclothed,
Mm,
completely naked, and allowing someone to occupy the exact same space that you occupy in the world for that moment.
mm,
It if you stop and think about it, the reverence of it is just phenomenal,
yes.
right? Because the only other time that the human body can occupy the exact same space is when a woman is pregnant.
Mm,
So you have this like just crazy moment in time that you are one, literally. The only way you can make that extremely pleasurable, extremely sacred is to have the connection with the person.
yes.
And that's what we were talking about. That's the intimacy. If
Yes.
you build the intimacy within the relationship, it'll transfer into the bedroom. It will,
Yes.
because that is your most vulnerable. That's no longer, oh, let me just take off this port before you see this. Let me turn off the lights before
Mm,
you see us. Let's not do that. All kind of goes away when it's like, no, this is who we are. If you're able to be who you are, right, goes back to the blooming. I want to bloom beautifully within my marriage. And the only way that I can do that is if I have built a foundation of connection, trust, honesty, that true intimacy.
wow. And I want to borrow that word you just used, that being intimate with your partner is a sacred act. And
Yes.
in its true sense, it is a sacred act. If we really understand that, if everybody would understand, and I wish they do, um, the rapes would never happen, right? Women, girls, they would never feel awkward, outside or around men or anyone basically. So
Yeah.
how can we make or develop this understanding of taking this as a sacred act? What should be the first step? What can be the first step?
Yeah, before I answer that, I just want to make a moment of clarity for especially sexual assault, because I know a lot of sexual assault survivors and now thrivers in
Mm,
who they are, right? Rape is about power. Rape is not at all a sexual act. And as much as I truly believe sex education, sexual wellness, really understanding a person's body can help to prevent sexual assault, I think it's more the ones that are coerced, like heavily coerced and heavily manipulated into that sexual assault. Those types of things, having true body autonomy will help to prevent. But ultimately, that rape is a violation, and the person that's at fault is the perpetrator and only the perpetrator. Because no matter how strong a person is, another person can take power and control over them. And so I just want to stop and give space that there, I don't want to say that just knowing this will
Mhm.
prevent them. It
Right.
won't. But what it'll do is it'll help people be stronger to know what's coming or to hear things coming, to hear red flags, and hopefully prevent some of the ones that can be prevented. The ones to say, you know what, let me get out of this before I get too deep. Let me hear what is being said. Let me see what is being said in a way that I wasn't even thinking about it because I didn't have this kind of understanding and this foundation. So that's just a little bit of clarity
Thank you.
and space I want to give for those that are survivors. And then so your question about the sacredness of sexuality. I think the first thing once again starts with yourself,
Mm,
right? Spending time knowing your true sexual self. When I talk about sex and sexuality, I talk a lot about sexual wellness versus sexual health. And for me, the difference is being proactive in understanding my body and what it is as a sexual being. That's what sexual wellness is. Sexual health also includes, in addition to that, it includes things like prevention of disease, condom usage, prevention of pregnancy when, when needed or wanted. It is special populations like, well, what our society I think calls such special populations like gender diverse populations and things like that. So that sexual health is usually a response. It's for me, it's more of a response to something. Sexual wellness is the act. It's the act of living and being truly well and knowing how connected I am to my sexuality. And
mm,
so that sacredness, stopping and saying, who am I? What does that look like? How do I want to show up in the world? What does that mean when I show up that way? What type of outcomes am I looking for? What type of outcomes do I want to thwart? How am I going to respond when I don't get the outcomes I want? All of that thinking and that um, preparation is really about being steadfast in who we are as sexual beings, understanding how our body responds to certain triggers, even if they are self induced triggers, right? Knowing how our body reacts to, sexually reacts to the foods that we take in.
mm,
That's extremely important, right? That is our nutrition health, but our nutritional health could throw off our pH balance. It could throw off our arousal cycles. It can throw off erection. I mean, there are a lot of things that we have sexual consequences from because of what we eat and what we put into our bodies. So
mm,
that's the first step, I think, to sexual sacredness is really understanding who we're showing up as. I think the second step is allowing and fostering and creating the intimacy within the relationship. And I'm going to even expand the relationship to the entire household, right? My children are able to ask me questions around sex and sexuality. They are able to ask their father questions around sex and sexuality because the house is an intimate household. The house has said we are going to be connected. We are going to be able to show up as our most vulnerable selves here so that we are able to show up authentically out there, right? So that's that sacredness is the entire house understands. Part of that too, Ansa, is that for couples that have children in their household, part of that sacredness is keeping a space that is yours and sexually safe,
oh,
right? So
that.
if your bedroom is going to be that space, because for most of us, that's what it is. We don't necessarily have, hideaways in our households. We have our bedroom. And if that's that space, then give it that sacredness. Do not allow your children to come in and out with unannounced.
Mm,
No, it's your space. It's your space. Have them knock, have them ask for entry, but that's your space. If
yes.
there's things that's in your space that you don't want them to touch, Do not go over. That is our space. This is our shelf. This is our information. You don't get to touch that, right? You can ask about something that you see that's out and about. You cannot touch it. It's not for you,
Mm,
right? Those are boundaries. Those are creating sexual boundaries. Let me tell you how important those types of and kind of building in healthy boundaries are.
yes.
My son was dating someone and they were having a conversation. He was like, well, no, I don't necessarily need to be with you. I want to be with you.
Mm,
And the person got really upset. And it's like, no, you need me. You need me. You should need me. Why are we in a relationship if you don't need me? And at that age, because they were like 15, 16, the other person couldn't understand. I said, well, that's a very mature way of thinking about relationships, son. That's a very mature boundary.
yes.
Teenagers don't usually have that boundary.
Yes.
So
100%.
you have to, right, you have to understand that yes, as an adult and as what you have been taught is that we all have choices. Every single time we open the door, every single time I give you a hug, every single time I allow you to spend time with me, you have the autonomy to say, no, I don't want to.
True.
That's not, and so you're choosing that. You're telling me, I want you to be here. I want you to be in my space.
Exactly.
You understand that.
Yes.
That person probably has never been taught that.
True.
So while you're saying, no, it should mean more to you that I want you, that
Exactly.
I'm every single day I'm choosing you.
Yes. That's
I am,
exactly what it means. And so many of us, we are thinking not just about intimate relationships, right? We are thinking about everything like the other person or everybody around me should need me in order to validate my presence or my importance. That's
that's it.
how we think, the same along the same lines in our relationships.
Yep.
This is not healthy. Yes.
Yes, it's not. It's not healthy. It's like you've got to have some type of boundary to say, no, I want to be with you. And when I want to be with you, I'll let you know. And that's fine. And that's great. And there are times that I don't want to be with you. Doesn't mean mentally we're not still together. Does not mean that emotionally we're not still connected. At this moment, I want to spend time with myself.
Mhm.
Right. So you can see how those two, even in this kind of sacredness, they go together. Learn yourself so then you can have sacred spaces and you can decide when you want to be in that sacred space together and when you want to be in that sacred space by yourself, right? It ties into each other. And I think the last step with creating sacred sexuality is really having rituals, shared rituals, individual rituals, things that you can do that ground you back to this is what we've made meaning of, right? Because we make meaning every single day. There's a saying, and I cannot remember the philosopher that says it, but he says, you cannot not communicate,
Mm,
right? You can't. Even in silence, there's communication. So, what you say, what you do, how you say it, the tone, the non existence of saying anything, that's all communication.
it is.
And so when we create these spaces, when we create these rituals, they need to ground us in what we've agreed, we've communicated, we understand, and we agree on. That's what the ritual should say. And it should exude that this is what's coming out of this ritual. If the
Mm,
ritual is to do body praising, I teach people how to do body praising activities and rituals. If it's that, it's I want to stop and take the moment to praise your eyes.
mm,
That's all I want to focus on. So now it's not the societal way of saying, oh, he looked deep into my eyes. He must want me. No, right now, that's not what this is. Right now, that is me saying, let me tell you all the things that I love about your eyes, just for the purpose of pouring into you.
yes.
Nothing else. Nothing else. Right. If the ritual is um, lighting a candle and sitting quietly, maybe it's just, okay, if we're going to do this together, we do need to just take time for our souls to connect
Mm,
with nothing else happening, right?
right.
What does that mean for us? What did that bring up for us? What
Mm,
do we need to pay attention to? So when we make rituals, when we create rituals, we are making meaning of
Yeah.
the time that we share together, the time that we're being intentional about each other. And so those are all the things that kind of, like I teach when I teach couples coaching and sex coaching and how do we do this? Because I think people just go about their lives and
Yes.
they just like, oh, we're going to be married and we're just going to stay married together forever. And they don't realize, like, no, there's a whole lot, there's a million little things that can happen that either throw us off course or keep us on course of a forever marriage. And that's what I try to kind of teach and infuse. And so I think that that's a wonderful question. And so I hope I answered, how do you kind of really create that sacred sexuality within a marriage?
Yeah, that was beautiful, and you covered everything. And I love the part, we're creating rituals for the couple, together. And I was thinking it could be, so many things, the way you decide to create your rituals together,
Yes.
right? Anything, the lighting in the room, or how you want to set up your bed. Your partner wants to make bed sometime. You want to pick certain kind of bed sheets or the color of the bed sheets, whatever, right? You can make
Whatever it is.
whatever it works for you, just do it and take the time. And I know, and especially coming from my culture, I keep mentioning that men are not as involved in those things, right? And over time, so many couples I see, they're living together just because they have to, they are married, they have kids, but they lose that attraction, they lose that magic in their
Mhm.
relationship, right? And the marriage looks so empty and dry, in terms of your bedroom affairs. And what would you say, how they can regenerate, or go back to the earlier stages when they were so in love with each other, like, as you said, it's such a wonderful, and I would love for you to expand on that as well, like body praising, because we are all human beings. We want to hear good things about ourselves, right? Okay, the other person, my spouse likes me, likes my body in this way or that way. What really entices him or her? So please, if you could expand on that, I would love that.
So what we have to remember is when we put stuff in, stuff will come out. When you put good stuff in, good stuff will come out. So what grows is what you show attention to.
Mm.
So the only way that we're going to grow love, the only way we're going to grow intimacy, the only way that we're going to grow closer together is if we start doing things that keep us together, right? We start doing things that are intentional about us sharing time, space, energy, intimacy. We have to do that constantly. My daughter always asks me, I love dried roses.
Mhm.
So I will get roses from my husband, and he knows I don't like I don't do roses on holidays and stuff like that. Just give me roses for just because then that tells me you thought about me intentionally, right? That's that intentionality piece. But I also like to keep one and have it dried. And she's like, I don't understand. Why do you keep dried roses dead? I was like, for me, what it says is I didn't attend to it. I didn't give it water. I didn't nourish it. It's still beautiful. It's still the same color. It it held its own. Like now it's dried out, but it's still beautiful. But I've put it on a shelf, and yes, it died to me because I didn't do my part. And that's what I think we forget in marriages, long-term relationships, is that you have to put the time in to do the work. If you don't know what that work looks like, go find a sex therapist, actually a sex educator, a sex coach, a relationship coach, a marriage coach. Find them, hire them, and have them help you learn how to build that into your relationships. You have to do the work. You have to spend time together. It doesn't have to be every single week at the exact same time on the exact same day, but have date nights. Have nights that you do something that's completely out of the ordinary for the two of you to do. Find new ways to make brand new memories, right? Find things that you have not done before and do them together. Feel uncomfortable
Mm.
together because that's what that's about, right? Because remember when you came together, the world was uncomfortable, right? And you're like, oh my God, I found some safety in this person. This person makes me happy. Well, you got to figure that out now because now a lot of your uncomfortableness is because of each other. You don't like the way the bed was made. You
Yeah.
don't like the way the dishes were done. They left the car a mess and you had to go clean it. Like it's all of these things that now you don't like about the other person. Well, you've got to be purposeful to build in the things that you do like and love about the person, right? And that's that intentionality. That's fueling it. That's watering it. That's making it grow because that's what you need to make sure you stay fully enamored and engaged with that person.
Mm. This is so
Yeah.
powerful. And I would say this advice is for everybody. If you are not married and you're planning to get married, remember this.
Yes.
And if you are a married couple, please infuse this into your life and get that magic back because you deserve to live happy, right, with your partner, and they deserve to live happy with you. If they might not be getting this information, they are not watching this podcast, you are. So do your part and bring them in and watch this
Yep.
together and maybe figure out how you want to create that or recreate that beauty, that magic in your relationship. I loved where you mentioned food and sexuality. Please talk to me like how the right kind of diet, the right kind of food is helpful and necessary to continue blooming in our sexuality, both genders.
Yes. Yes, 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 yes. So I think anything that is kind of nutrition advice, you
Mm,
want to stop and think about how does it apply to your sex life, right? So there is a lot about meat moderation
mm,
in the world, right? So you don't need to eat so much of beef and pork and the heavy meats. Eat things that are a little bit less in density, like seafood and then green leafies and vegetables and things like that. Well, that's just practical advice. The same reason that that's practical advice around nutrition, they're like, okay, that means you're more active, you're running, a little bit more and easier. You feel lighter. Well, that's the same thing as it relates to your sexuality. You don't, if you feel bogged down and you're sleepy and you just want to go to sleep when you go to bed, well, then you're never going to get to the sexuality side of things. You're never going to get to engage sexually because you're tired. You feel heavy. Who wants to have somebody else by them or on them when they feel bloated and full, right? That's kind of just the practical thought of things. Like, no, don't go get a burger on a date. It's
mm.
probably going to slow you down if the whole point of after the date you're going to have sex. Like, don't do that. Don't do that.
On
And it's not just women. Like I think sometimes like, oh yeah, well she'll have a salad. No, sir, you should have a salad too. Your body has had meals all throughout the day. It's okay for you to have a salad at your dinner hour so you can hopefully have some energy for any other activities. Um, I think the other thing, like about acid, right? So when we take in acid changes our internal, like just the pH balance of our internal fluids. So there's fluids in sexuality. There's lubrication for women. There is pre-ejaculate with men. Those fluids flow differently. They taste differently depending on your acidic level. So there's something to say about having low acid drinks. There's something to say about having water that is alkaline, right? There's things that you are doing that I don't think sometimes we think about we're doing probably right for our other health that we're also paying attention to our sexual health by doing so. Um, let me see. I have a nutritionist that I always go to for these things. So I'm trying to pull out from her bag of tricks. Chef Tracy is awesome with this. Um, uh, green leafy. Green leafy also helps because it slows down anything that has folic acid. It slows down um, the way that our body metabolizes, right? And so if we're able to metabolize things and not stay full and like heavy all day, then that does allow for the other hormones in our body to say, okay, no, we can be aroused, we can have some sexy time because our body is taking care of the digestion stuff because I've put in enough of folic acid, I've put in enough green leafy, it's taking care of that. So now my hormones can function the way that they should function. So there's all of these things at this intersection, I think, of food and sexuality that we don't think about.
Yeah.
Often we say like we will eat oysters, right? It makes you a little bit more aroused. Well, everybody doesn't like oysters. Here's a
Mm,
trick: okra, right? People, it's a vegetable. It's green. It doesn't necessarily make you more aroused, but it does keep your body more lubricated, which means then for women, there's an easier flow with lubrication because it adds the, think about the sliminess of an okra, right? It adds and helps for that. So if you don't like okra, take an okra extract, right?
mm,
Find ways to put it into your system, into your natural routine, so that you know you're doing things that are healthy for your sexuality. Drink a lot of water. I tell people this all the time. Drink water. Water makes everything flow properly. Everything. So drink your water.
love that. Oh my God, this is such a wealth of knowledge. And especially that, now I'm thinking that we need time, right? Maybe entire day, start thinking from the early morning, the night that you have your date with your spouse, with your partner, right? Plan ahead. Think about, getting properly cleaned, and so they feel attracted, and there are no smells, there is no digestion issues, because so many of us, and teach this please to your kids as well. How else are they going to learn, right?
Agreed.
Practice yourself and teach to your kids as well. Be a good parent, be a good elder, whoever you are in that kid's life. Help them understand all of that and more. So now, what else goes into having a good, my gosh, I'm got so excited.
Oh, so what else? I think you hit the nail on the head on so when you said make this an all day thing. One of the things that I feel is so important when we are sexually well, we do realize how much of our day intersects with our sexuality. I think by not realizing that, that's what allows us to go in ways that we realize, oh my God, I didn't want that to happen. Well, it's
Mm,
because you didn't really pay attention throughout the day, right? Um, I remember one of my clients finally learned, we were talking about erogenous zones, and they learned that their erogenous zone was their head. Like for them, it was their head, their scalp. But they had a very low haircut. It was a female, had a very low haircut, and she was like, "Oh my God, now that I know that this is my erogenous zone, now I realize why I would get so upset when people, men or whoever, would go to touch my head and say, 'Oh, let me feel your head or your scalp,' even if they were meaning well about it. Like if we were on a date, I would get so upset, and I was like, I never knew why. Well, because you never asked the question, why am I getting upset? Right? Why, what else could this mean besides I'm just angry?
yeah.
Now you realize it had nothing to do with anger. It had, you felt like you were being violated
Mm,
because you didn't even know yourself to know that that was one of your erogenous zones, right? And so just stopping and realizing how much of our day truly does intersect with our sexuality and who we are and how we are. You don't have to be like paranoid about it. You don't have to be overly sexual about it, but just stopping and thinking about your own thoughts. If you see someone and you're like, ooh, that's a little showy for what they have on. It's like, but where did that thought come from in me? Why am I criticizing somebody else's appearance? What is it that I'm feeling and I'm saying about this person to myself? You might not have said it out loud to anybody, but you've got to stop and think about how that what that means for you in your own sexuality that you think somebody else is
mm,
being too showy,
right.
right? What does that mean? What messages did that come from that you have now internalized and made who you are? Um, think about what you put on in the morning. How are you going to show up? Because when we feel good about ourselves, including sexually, we show up, we bloom a little bit better out in the day. We
Absolutely.
show up, there's something about for us women, a good feeling bra, right? Because it makes our shoulders sit back and it sits the girls up. And we're like, yes, I'm coming out in the world. People see that. You usually get more compliments. You
Yeah.
smile a little bit more. Why? That's all a part of your sexual autonomy. You said, no, My girls being at attention is how I want to show up today. And I am going to get that back in return in a healthy way, right?
That's
You're purposeful about it.
true.
And that is what I'm talking about. It's just kind of being purposeful and understanding how much of our life and our bodies and our lives every day, how it really does. It's impacted by our sexual wellness. And we take it for granted because we don't necessarily live sexually well.
Yes, absolutely. Because these conversations are considered so taboo, and especially for women and young girls, they are taught as if the sex and sexuality is such a bad thing. You shouldn't even have those body parts around you. Don't even look at them, don't talk about them. If there is a problem, how are you going to recognize that problem? Because you feel like as if this thing should not be attached to my body altogether. So you're looking down about it, you're looking bad about it. And then there are when we talk about sexual wellness and sexual health, yeah, I would love for you to dive into that aspect of it. Like, if we see some problems, how do we address those problems, and what kind of education and resources or just mindset do we need as women and men too, but especially for women, in order to address those kind of issues?
Yeah, I think first things first is that you need to find some trusted, accurate information.
Mm.
So find sex educators and health coaches that specialize in sexuality to follow. My Instagram is always open for people. I tell people please welcome and send me a private message if you have a question about something that I've posted, so you can have a two-way communication with me and I answer them. I don't regulate. There's not somebody else that's there to see them. I see them, I get my own messages and I answer them.
Can
I
you
think
please
having
say
those
your
types.
Instagram handle at this point? Of course, we will do at the end too, but I want people to have it even right now.
Sure. So it's dibs on sex. So DIBS on SEX. So pretty simple. Please, please follow and please, like I said, please let me know if you have any questions. Drop them in the comments of any of the posts. Send me a message and I will answer them right back to you. I think so. That is first, right? Educate yourself. Find books and information that is accurate on your body and its changes and how it will constantly change and evolve and how you can purposefully be a part of that change. Find books and information on the full gamut, not just medical information and knowledge, but let's also think about somatic things, things that's about touch and um, and connection, right? So that's around the somatic things. Think about things that are around your mental health and wellness and sexuality. Think about things that are around pleasure and eroticism. So look and find information on the full gambit of sexuality, not just one particular thing. Um, so that's first. And I think as far as kids, having that strong foundation as an adult, it helps you answer those questions in a more affirming way. I think sometimes we tend to, I know for me, my culture, it's about shame and guilt and don't say that, or why would you even ask it? Good girls don't say that. Good boys don't do that to good girls. Like it's all of this kind of shame and bipolarism of goods and bads. And that's not the way sex and sexuality is. It's a very broad spectrum. It's a lot of multicolor, right? Of how you engage sexually. And so when you are confident in the information that you have, then you're able to transfer that in a way that's a little bit healthier, as well as age appropriate for children. Definitely when children ask questions, ask more questions.
Mm,
Don't jump to answer, right? Where did you hear that from? Tell
yes.
me a little bit about why you're wanting to know this so I can answer you as best as possible. Let me see, like, can you show me what it is that you saw that made you ask this question so that I can answer you, right? The
Exactly.
reason you want to do that is because you don't want to adultify. Remember, we talked about adultification. You don't want to adultify the question. You don't want them to ask you what is sex, and then you try to get out diagrams and videos, and they literally are just saying, I saw this word, I don't know what, I don't even have an understanding of what the word is. Can you just tell me, is this word sex, is this sex? And then what does that mean to you? Okay, well, that is something that adults do. we haven't necessarily talked about it yet. I think that we have some other questions and answers. Can you tell me a little bit more about what do you mean? Where did you see it? Why are you asking about it? Right. So I can ask you that before you go into pull it out stuff. They're not even there yet. It's been dependent on their age. You don't know what they're really asking.
Yes.
Right. And so let's make sure that we're doing that first and foremost. And then I think the other thing that's very important is just to be honest with yourself. Be
Mm.
honest with what and why you're saying things the way that you're saying. I think honesty and the lack of honesty gets us into so much of trouble sexually. When
Mm.
I look at certain television shows, especially some of those shows that are about, I'm a huge what do you call it? Like the crime stories and things like
Wow.
that. I'm a huge fan of those things. But a lot of times you'll hear somebody say, oh, they were living a salacious lifestyle, or oh, that fetish was so taboo. Well, the reason that you look at it, the reason that the crime even happened was because they felt like they couldn't tell somebody that
Oh,
they had this sexual, agenda or this sexual interest. So they're living this other lifestyle that now they feel like they have to, kill for to keep private.
yes.
Honesty is so important to yourself, to your partner, to your partners. You've got to be honest about this is what I like, this is what I want, because then that takes away the oh, I gotta keep this. No one else can know about this because this is such a horrible secret to have. It
True.
keeps that all away, right?
Yes.
So the sexual honesty is very important.
Wow. This is the whole conversation, I think, is not just physical, it's spiritual
Very
because,
much so.
right? It's all spiritual because it ties into our mental being, our physical being, and our spiritual being. Because I feel like, as we discussed earlier, that it's such a sacred act of two people coming together, right? And exploring their own self, exploring their individuality, their sexuality, and then procreating a
Yep.
life, right? Procreating life. And this is how we exist today, because throughout the history, our ancestors, they have been engaging in a healthy way of procreation, and here we are. And hopefully we are in a place where we have more education, we have more knowledge, we have more resources, so we can make it better and pleasurable and safe for everyone, including ourselves.
Mhm.
So I love this. And going back to earlier, what advice would you say for our listeners? I know there were so many pieces of, wonderful information and advice that you gave throughout, but if at the end of the conversation, what would be one advice that you think like, okay, everybody should take this away?
Stay curious and stay natural with your sexuality. I think that is so important. If we don't realize that everything that we do from the minute that we come into this world to the minute that we leave could have some intersection with our sexuality, and that is okay and natural, we lose what we are and who we are. We lose that. And so we have to remain curious. You don't have to take in everything and absorb everything that you see, right? You can decide, I've looked at this, I've studied it, I've figured out whether or not it aligns with me. I don't want it. It does not align with me. But now I know, and now I'm putting it on the outside of my personal space. You can do that. That doesn't mean you should close yourself off to things. Oh, no, I know that that is taboo. Oh, no, I know that that is perverted. Oh, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to hear it. I'm not going to learn about it. I'm not going to see it.
Mm,
That that stops the curiosity. That stops the meaning making for who you are, right?
yes.
It's okay for us to hear something and then say, I am making a conscious decision for that not to be a part of my life and my sexuality. That is healthy. That is wellness, right?
Yes.
We do it all the time with other things.
Yes.
People will say, "Oh no, this is real. It's really healthy for you to eat cheese every day. Go ahead and do it." And you're like, I ate it for 2 days in a row. My stomach did not like it. My husband did not like it. I'm not going to eat it anymore. I'm
Yes.
okay with that. Great advice, but not for me. We do it every single day. But we change the rules sometimes when it happens and then when it comes down to sexuality. And I don't think that's fair. We need to be open, be honest, take it in, decide if it's something for us, and then, leave it there. If it's not, take it in and make it a part of who we are if it is. So I would say being curious and realizing sexuality is completely natural is definitely what I'd like to see people walk away with.
Wow. Thank you so much. And when it comes to educating ourselves, I know you are an educator and you have written books about it. You have so much material and content out there. Do you want to talk about the books and if our readers want to, buy your books, what would they learn from those books and what are the topics discussed in those books?
Sure. So my first book came out a long time ago at this point. At some point, I'm going to get a second one. But that one was more of a DIY. Alphabet Gumbo was a do-it-yourself for infusing sexuality and spicing up your sex life in a marriage and long-term committed relationship. There was also some things in there for singles. So if you are, you're not partnered yet or you're not coupled yet, then you want to still engage in sexual wellness activities. There's a little single side item that's in there for you to do an activity that helps you with your own sexual wellness. I've also written a bunch of articles that are there. So if you really just Google Davondra Brown, I'm sure that they'll pop up. And most recently, though, I've contributed to a book that was around Black women's sexual health and reproductive health. And that's the book you see there in the background. That's the Black Women's Reproductive Health and Sexuality Guide, a holistic public health approach. And so that is for professionals, those health professionals that are out there that are seeing people, and those people want to engage and have conversations about their sexual health, about their reproductive health. And so it's to inform and make sure that our health professional population is ready and willing to have these conversations from a cultural perspective to make sure that they're able to answer them with cultural humility and be aware of the things that are important for us as Black women. It is really, really beneficial, I think, for people to take a look at this and to embed it in their classes, if they're professors, embedded in their practices, if they are practitioners and providers of health, because this book is a compendium of health educators, sexuality educators, sexologists, sex therapists, licensed practical counselors. And so this is a compendium of everyone's expertise around this knowledge of sexuality and wellness for people. And so it's a really good foundational book for health and healing professionals. So that one I think is on the APHA website, the American Public Health Association.
Beautiful. Thank you so much,
Of
Devandra, for
course.
taking the time to, explaining everything that you did with us and being so generous with your time. I know you're very busy, but you're so gracious to take the time and have this conversation with us. I'm sure our viewers learned so much from this, and at least, it will spark conversation or a thought within themselves to see sexuality and intimacy from a healthy perspective. And if you have really enjoyed this conversation, please give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't already subscribed to my YouTube channel, Bloom with Ansa, please do subscribe and I will see you in the next episode. Before I let you go, I want to repeat my motto, which is chase your dreams and live with passion. Thank you so much. Take care.